The jungle of Ralvin 9 was not made for boots, let alone Terran regulation ones with armor-plated soles. The muck sucked at every step like it had a personal grudge, and the trees, if you could call 12-meter spiral-barked monstrosities with bioluminescent fungi clinging to their trunks trees, whispered in ways that made even the seasoned troops jump. Sergeant Dale Harrow, however, was unimpressed. A decade of campaigns had left his nerves dulled, his humor sharpened, and his prosthetic leg permanently stuck in squelch mode every time he stepped in something green. The war here had been going on so long nobody really remembered why it started. Resources, probably, or honor, or some incident involving a diplomatic dinner and a poisoned Elvari wine goblet. Dale wasn't sure. What he was sure of was that the jungle stank. The bugs were the size of dinner plates, and the last firefight had scattered his squad like breadcrumbs on a windy day. He crouched behind a boulder, checking his pulse rifle. It still hummed low with residual charge, enough for a few shots if things went sideways. Again, his HUD flickered with static, some sort of interference. Ralvin's atmosphere played havoc with Terran tech, like the whole damn moon resented being colonized. Not that the Elvari ever asked for their ancestral jungle temples to be turned into tactical strongholds. Then it happened. A cry, not a scream, not a shout. Those he could handle. This was higher-pitched, fragile, rhythmic. A baby. Dale froze. He turned slowly, one eye squinting against the flicker of smoke from a crashed Elvari glideship. The vessel was mostly torn metal and shredded leaves, but nestled against one side, partially shielded by a slab of hull plating, was a figure. Blue-skinned, armored, slouched forward protectively, one arm around a squirming bundle. Elvari. Dale stayed low, one hand instinctively on his rifle. The Elvari were not known for mercy. Their warriors were lithe, deadly, and deeply committed to their code of solar bone, which sounded poetic but mostly meant kill first, maybe philosophize after tea. And yet, this one wasn't attacking. She didn't even look up. She was swaying slightly, her body clearly injured, her ears long and rigid with stress. The baby, also blue, also loudly unhappy, was wrapped in a thermal shawl and vibrating with rage. Dale sighed. Really? A baby in a war zone? He muttered. I can't even keep a cactus alive. He checked again. No movement nearby. No heat signatures except hers. His orders were to scout ahead, report enemy sightings, and under no circumstances engage unless fired upon, which this technically wasn't. Technically. All right, he grumbled, standing. Let's do something stupid. He slung his rifle across his back and walked slowly toward the wreckage, hands up, palms visible. The Elvari woman's eyes snapped to his, vivid amber. Blood streaked one side of her temple, and her gauntlet flexed around the hilt of a blade at her hip. She did not draw it. Hi, Dale said, keeping his voice even. That your kid, or are you babysitting for someone way less lucky? No response. The baby screamed louder. Right. Great talk. Look, I'm not here to shoot anyone. I heard the noise and figured maybe, I don't know, you could use some help. Still no response. The Elvari woman's expression was granite. The baby started hiccup crying now, like it had run out of breath but was still very committed to the performance. Dale reached slowly into his pack, careful to make no sudden moves. He pulled out a ration bar, peach-flavored, allegedly. He crouched and set it gently on a flat rock a meter away from her. For you, or the kid. I'm not judging. The woman's eyes flicked from his face to the bar and back. She didn't move. Dale waited. He adjusted his stance, trying to look less like a soldier and more like a concerned dad. If concerned dads came with body armor, a scar across one eye, and the smell of ionized sweat. The baby hiccuped again, then let out another wail so piercing it made Dale's teeth vibrate. He grimaced. Okay, all right, fine. No offense, lady, but your child might be weaponized. Is this a sonic defense strategy? Because if so, kudos. Still nothing. Right. I'm talking to myself now. Classic Harrow move. Let's just sit here and hope neither of us gets vaporized by a Boer drone. Minutes passed. Tension settled like mist. Eventually the woman shifted. She didn't speak. Elvari language wasn't easy to mimic, and her vocal cords worked differently anyway, but she grunted, just barely, and tapped her fingers in a pattern against her knee. Dale recognized it as some kind of signal, maybe a warning, or an invitation. She reached for the ration bar. Dale tried not to grin too widely. There we go. Progress. First contact over a processed peach bar. Historic stuff. The baby miraculously quieted as soon as its mother unwrapped the food. She broke a piece off with practiced fingers, then paused, and offered a crumb back toward Dale. He blinked. Well, I'll be damned. He accepted the offering, chewing carefully. It tasted like insulation foam and old sugar, but it was the best thing he'd eaten all week. They sat in silence. Time passed, the sounds of distant gunfire muffled by jungle fog. Dale's comm unit clicked uselessly, still jammed. The HUD was down. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, he wasn't thinking about patrols or flanks or orbital strikes. Just about the weird moment he was having with an alien warrior and her deceptively tiny, glass-lunged child. Eventually he said, "So, what do I call you? Got a name? I mean, I could just keep calling you ma'am, but that feels formal. Or blue. Too vague. Screamer Senior? She looked at him flatly. All right, how about this? Pointy. Your ears could catch satellite signals. Pointy it is. No protest, no agreement. But her head tilted, just slightly. Dale smiled. Glad we're on the same page. The baby slept. The woman sat straighter. Dale leaned back against the rock, weapon still within reach but untouched. Outside, the war ground on. But in this tiny sliver of jungle, held together by peach bars and a child's cry, something delicate had begun to form. Not trust, not yet, but something close enough to keep them both breathing. And Dale Harrow, who hadn't believed in anything but bad luck for a long time, felt the tiniest flicker of curiosity in his chest. The kind that made him wonder, not about orders or tactics, but about who this alien woman was and what would happen next. By the time the second day had passed, Sergeant Dale Harrow had concluded three things. First, Elvari babies had no volume control. Second, alien diapers involved at least 5 moving parts, and one glowing crystal that vibrated when it was fully charged, whatever that meant. And third, he might be losing his mind, but he was starting to enjoy himself. They were trapped. Not by choice. He hated caves, and this one smelled like damp moss and regret. But after a Terran gunship had passed overhead and lit the jungle canopy behind them with plasma, the tunnel they'd taken for cover became a tomb. The collapse sealed them in with a few emergency lights, 2 crates of salvaged rations, and one furious infant whose cry could theoretically be used as an interrogation tool. Dale tried to build a makeshift antenna out of scraps from his backpack and a shard of Elvari alloy. No signal. He tried tapping into his HUD uplink. Nothing but static and an occasional jolt of electricity to the temple. He gave up on tech and focused on survival, which meant somehow learning to share a confined space with her. She had not told him her name. She rarely spoke, but her eyes were always watching, golden and sharp. She moved with a coiled tension, even when nursing the child. The blade at her hip never left her reach. Dale didn't blame her. If the roles were reversed, he wouldn't trust himself either. Still, the silence was suffocating. So, Dale began on the third morning, while trying to sterilize a feeding nozzle using the faint heat of a discharged plasma coil. Any chance you speak Terran Common, or am I just charming myself here? The Elvari woman raised an eyebrow. Not quite a response, but more than he'd gotten in a day. I'll take that as, your accent is terrible, he said. No worries. I flunked 3 semesters of Martian French, too. He looked at the baby, who was currently chewing on his dog tags like they were a teething toy. Hey, that's government property, the child gurgled. She laughed. That was a laugh, right? Dale turned to the woman. Or is it a warning? Hard to tell with babies. They're either delighted or preparing to explode. To his utter shock, the woman made a sound. Not a word, but a kind of chuff. Short, breathy. Her shoulders trembled slightly. Could it possibly be a laugh? Dale sat back, grinning. Okay, I get it. I'm funny when I'm covered in spit and baby drool. Tough crowd. It became a pattern. They shared food without speaking. She handled the baby's strange care rituals, rubbing a glowing balm over the infant's forehead, humming soft melodic tones that resonated faintly in Dale's bones. He helped by fetching supplies, keeping a fire going with his field lighter, and offering commentaries so absurd even she occasionally smirked. Once he held the baby while she repaired a leak in the wall with a shimmering, silvery gel. The child stared up at him, blinking slowly. "I'm not your dad, kid," he murmured, shifting the baby to one arm, "but I guess I'm what you've got right now." He glanced over at her. She didn't look up from her work. "But just for the record," he added, "I'm great with kids. I once babysat my cousin's twins. They only set one couch on fire." Later that night, she took his hand. Not affectionately, not gently, but firmly. She turned his palm upward and used the tip of her finger to draw symbols into his skin. Ivari script. He tried to mimic the strokes. She corrected him silently, guiding his finger like a teacher with a half-patient student. The message translated roughly into, "You fight with honor, you speak too much." He laughed out loud. "That's the nicest insult I've ever gotten." The cave echoed with quiet. Not silence, never silence. Not with the faint hum of the Elvari infant's heartbeat resonating through its weird crystalline blanket, but something more peaceful than before. The air between them shifted, less like two enemies trapped in a box, more like reluctant allies. Very reluctant, but allies. He learned her name by accident. It was stored in the baby's band, the silver bracelet-like thing around its ankle, inscribed with fluid, glowing Elvari glyphs. He ran a scan with his rifle's optics and translated what little his software could. It pinged back a name, Kelira then Vastalari. He looked at her. "Kelira?" She paused mid-bite, looked up slowly. "Is that you?" A pause. Then the slightest nod. Dale nodded back. "Kelira, got it. I'm Dale. Harrow, if we're being formal, but I respond to hey idiot too." She gave him a long, unreadable look. They began teaching each other words. She would gesture to something. Vethra for fire, Male for food, Keshtan for the baby, and he'd repeat it until she stopped wincing. In return, he taught her Terran slang. She didn't say much, but he caught her once whispering snafu under her breath after the baby overturned a food tray. Days passed. He wasn't counting. Maybe 5, maybe 7. He stopped tracking time after the baby learned to giggle every time Dale tripped over his own gear, which apparently was often. "Your kid's gonna grow up thinking gravity is hilarious," he grumbled. Kelira glanced at him. "Maybe it is." He blinked. "You speak common now?" She shrugged. "Listening." He stared at her. "That's not creepy at all." She smiled, just barely. Then came the tremor. It shook dust from the ceiling, a deep rumble, distant but growing. Dale grabbed his rifle and stood, pressing to the tunnel wall. Kelira moved fluidly, snatching up her child and pressing it close. The baby didn't cry this time. It simply stared, wide-eyed, as the sound grew louder. Rescue? Or something worse? Dale's heart pounded. He looked at Kelira. She looked at him. For once, no jokes came to his lips. Whatever was coming, they'd face it together. And Dale Harrow, war-worn, sarcastic, and completely unprepared for whatever this alliance was becoming, knew one thing for sure. He wasn't leaving without her. When the wall of the cave cracked with a roar like a beast splitting the earth in two, Dale Harrow barely had time to mutter, "Oh, perfect timing," before a burst of sunlight, actual, glorious, stinging sunlight, flooded the tunnel. For a split second, it looked like a divine epiphany. Then the air was filled with dust, the whining hum of scanners and the unmistakable clunk of Terran exoboots landing on stone. He shielded his eyes, Kelira clutching the baby tight beside him, and squinted through the swirling haze. Silhouettes moved like shadows of forgotten gods. Bulky, armored, gun-heavy, the insignia on their chest plates told him all he needed. 7th Recon, his old unit. "Stand down," someone shouted. "We've got 2 heat signatures, 1 human, 1 unknown." Dale raised his hands. "Sergeant Dale Harrow, still alive, somewhat. Do not shoot the lady or the baby, or I swear I'll haunt your dreams." A pause, then, "Sarge?" Corporal Juno stepped forward, his visor sliding up, revealing the same stupid mustache Dale had teased him about since basic training. "You're supposed to be dead," Dale smirked. "Technically, I was supposed to be on leave at the moons of Acheron with a bottle of synth whiskey. Life's funny that way." Juno's gaze shifted to Kalira and the baby, then back to Dale. "You're with them?" Dale dropped his arms. "I'm with the woman who saved my butt and didn't stab me in my sleep. Which, if you knew how sharp her knives are, is really saying something." The soldiers murmured, weapons still half raised. Kalira stood silent and still, the baby pressed against her chest, eyes sharp as always. Dale stepped in front of her. "She's not the enemy. Not anymore." He wasn't sure if they'd believe him, but he spoke with the kind of conviction you only get after surviving plasma blasts, jungle beasts, and alien diapers. It worked. Slowly, one by one, the rifles lowered. 3 days later, they were back at Forward Outpost K9, a glorified scrap heap nestled into the foothills of a burned jungle. Kalira had been given a secure medbay suite, more out of suspicion than kindness. The baby had received 5 scans, 3 pokes, and 1 accidental bath in nutrient gel, during which Dale had slipped, fallen in, and earned the new nickname Smoothie. "You know," he muttered, wringing gel from his sleeve, "there was a time in my life when I had dignity." Kalira, perched cross-legged on the cot with her child in her lap, raised an eyebrow. "Dignity is overrated." He grinned. "Don't let the general hear you say that. He irons his shoelaces." But behind the jokes, Dale could feel the tension rising. He'd overheard talk. Command wasn't sure what to do. Elvari civilians, especially ones who crossed lines and carried hybrid infants, weren't exactly covered in the field manual. Some wanted to treat her like a political pawn. Others wanted to study the baby. One particularly unpleasant colonel suggested decontamination protocols, which was a fancy way of saying, "Let's see what happens if we poke it with more needles." Dale made a decision. "Kalira," he said quietly one night as they stood outside under the stars, "we're not safe here." She tilted her head. "You are. I'm not." "No." He looked her straight in the eyes. "If they come for you, I won't let them. But if we stay, eventually someone will come, and they won't bring flowers." Her jaw tightened. "Where would we go?" He smiled. "Somewhere stupid." 2 days later, they were gone. Technically, Dale never stole the shuttle. He borrowed it. He left a note. "I owe you 1 lightly singed reconnaissance vessel. Also, your coffee machine was broken." They slipped into uncharted space using an Elvari full drive module Kalira had jury-rigged from scavenged parts, and a very confused maintenance droid named Steve. The baby giggled the whole time. Their destination? The Veil Expanse. A mess of black holes, rogue comets, and supposedly neutral zones where no one asked questions unless you owed them fuel. The shuttle groaned as it dropped out of fold space, barely holding together. Dale thumped the dashboard. "Come on, girl, don't quit on me now." "Are you speaking to the ship or to me?" Kalira asked, arms crossed. "Whichever one gets me to shut up less violently." She didn't laugh, but she didn't stab him either, so he counted it as progress. Months passed. They found an old listening post on a forgotten moon, abandoned but intact. Dale fixed it up. Kalira repaired its climate systems and turned one of the empty labs into a nursery. The baby, who they named Ray, after a star in both their languages, grew stronger, louder, and increasingly fond of pulling Dale's ears. He taught Ray to say boom every time a tool dropped. Kalira disapproved but secretly laughed when she thought he wasn't looking. Dale learned Elvari recipes, mostly involving root fungus and an alarming amount of spice. Kalira learned to tolerate Terran jokes, even the bad ones. One day, while cleaning the comms array, he paused, staring at the long-range transmitter. Kalira appeared beside him, silent. "You think we'll ever go back?" he asked. "When this war's over?" She didn't answer for a long time. Then, "Maybe, if the stars change." He nodded slowly. "And if they don't?" "Then we change the stars." Years later, people would whisper stories about a soldier and an alien woman who disappeared into deep space, about a baby born of 2 worlds, about a forgotten moon where Terran tech hummed beside Elvery crystal, where laughter echoed through abandoned halls, and humanity didn't end at skin or blood, but began with a cry and a choice. Sergeant Dale Harrow, once just another grunt in a long war, had become something else. A father, a partner, a bridge. And in the middle of nowhere, under unfamiliar constellations, he finally found something he never expected: home.